Whiplash for pensioners, says Hamish Calvert on Letterboxd. A not inaccurate assessment of this movie. This is definitely a film for old people, an admittedly well-meaning, light-hearted, albeit uninteresting and bland spectacle designed to entertain on a pretty basic level. These historical dramas, packed to the brim with barely funny jokes, too many characters, and a surprisingly star-studded cast, will never really be for me. Still, when you see enough trailers for something, you can get a strange itch to satisfy the curiosity of finding out whether or not it'll be any better than the other 50 identical films you've already seen in this genre. The film tries to give every single character something to do. While I appreciate all the actors and the fact that it was clearly fun to make, the overall experience is just not special, generic, a little bit awkward, predictable, and a little bit false in how it tries to trick you into caring for these incredibly basic personalities brought to life by a pretty uninspired script. It's not a bad film in any way whatsoever, just not one with much going for it. It has decent shots, nice sets, beautiful locations, nice music, relatable enough motivations, and only comes close to boring rather than being downright boring. There is someone out there, probably over the age of 60, who adores this movie and would give it a solid 10 out of 10. But I'm one of those people who took almost nothing out of it beyond a base level. Some of the sexual humour was mildly entertaining, such as the running gag of the choir lady who is a prostitute and the one-armed soldier being wanked off by his bird. But when those are the most memorable scenes that aren't melodramatic or formulaic, that's when I know it isn't really a film for me.
Boring! Next!
I'd never call the original Mithrigan a good movie based on what little I remember, although apparently I really enjoyed it in a semi-ironic way, given my rating and the little heart I gave it on Letterboxd. Mithrigan 2.0 is certainly a dumb movie that completely abandons the tone of the first movie for the sake of turning the titular character into a #slay icon that shoots guns, does martial arts, wears a winged jumpsuit, and befriends her ops for the sake of protecting some little brat that she still thirsts over. Showing the odd glimpse of cleverness and even being funny at points. The whole premise and script are so utterly ridiculous that the movie appears to revel in it. Nothing overly violent or interesting happens, but the film is full of action and serves as fairly decent mindless entertainment. I love sci-fi, and a lot of the techno mumbo-jumbo in this film was actually kind of fun for me. There's really not a lot to say about it because it is what you'd expect it to be. A laughable, silly, entertaining Blumhouse joint that got way too big for its child-sized boots. While the characters and the acting are serviceable at best, there's one particular aspect of both movies I don't like at all. Alison Mack's performance, and effectively, Gemma as a character. I don't know which one to blame first, but both of them, or going by the logic of the substance, the singular entity that is both of them is so fucking unlikable and irritating that it drags the movie through the dirt, like a western bounty hunter slowly and painfully dragging his prey along a dusty desert trail with a lasso. I cannot fucking stand her in this movie. I honestly hope the only continuation we get for Mithrigan is an epic GTA-style open-world video game where you can annihilate civilians and hack into the network, in a vein similar to the Watch Dogs franchise. I don't really like the Avatar series. They are what they are, which is a series of special effects show-offs with weak stories. And I'm not inherently against that so long as they, at the very least, try to tell a story. Even if I think it's bad, it's still a story that tries to develop its characters and explore the world it takes place in. And Fire and Ash probably does this the best for me. None of them are great or even good movies in my opinion, but Fire and Ash comes closest, both looking the nicest and having the closest thing to a well-rounded story. I still don't think it's very good because of how generic, predictable, and at times melodramatic it is. My favourite scenes usually involve Varang, who is honestly such an interesting and fun character to me, especially since she's basically a drug-abusing witch doctor leader of a vicious tribe who falls in love with an equally sociopathic murderer, whose only motivation is control and power. The Sullys, especially Kiri, an actual child voiced by a 76-year-old woman, aren't very interesting to me. However, I thought it was cool that Spider basically becomes a bioweapon when Kiri revives him, turning him into a genetic cross between a human and a Na'vi. At the very least, it gives him something to do, whereas he was just a plot device in the way of water. The whole scene where Jake literally contemplates killing him and we get a fake knife stab sound was absolutely ludicrous. and I kind of would have preferred it if they went the extra dark mile of actually killing him. It would have been pretty funny, but it winds up being laughable when it's not supposed to be. Considering its length, much of the film feels underdeveloped and rushed. Since it's so bloated, there isn't much for each character to do, with much of it being insistence on importance and giant alien whale politics, not too dissimilar to the second film. In fact, I'm pretty sure the structure of this film, including the fact it ends with a massive, overly long fight scene where Kiri and Tuck get taken hostage by Quaritch, is identical to The Way of Water. The whole ending sequence is pretty ridiculous, especially with how Ronald just decides she's going to give birth. Give birth! Before promptly dropping dead immediately afterwards. I kind of like how ash people basically become human mercenaries on their own right. As much as I like some of the characters, the writing is at best questionable, and even though it attempts to explore the universe's lore a little more, it mostly falls flat. Still, this is easily my favourite in the series thus far, and I'd actually be interested to see what they do in a fourth movie. That is, if it even gets made at this point. So director Ben Leonberg got the idea for this movie after watching Poltergeist and realised that one of the most common trends in horror movies is a dog's ability to sense when something is wrong, or at least to see what we can't. Figuring that the little furballs had been left on the sideline for too long, he decided to create a visually beautiful, technically sharp film taking place entirely from the perspective of man's best friend. The use of lighting and cinematography, along with an ambitious concept executed fairly well, makes for a visual treat, offering some neat, seemingly location-exclusive details to look at. It goes without saying at this point that Indy is easily up there with one of the best animal actors of all time, although I should note this film took over a year to make because, well, directing a dog ain't easy, kids. Its horror concepts and themes are very interesting, although it refuses to explain everything to the viewer as if we ourselves are a dog that can't fully comprehend human things, allowing us to interpret and understand the story's roots in our own ways. That is not to say that this film is flawless. While I do love the film visually and for all the other reasons I just mentioned, this little passion project that has fortunately been highly successful for what it is still suffers from the first-time filmmaker issue of a really boring, slow narrative that, despite its short running time of 73 minutes, had me tempted to drift off now and then while watching it at the cinema. While it tries to be scary and emotionally gripping, it doesn't do a particularly good job because I wasn't scared or emotionally connected to any of the human characters, so I found it difficult to care about them after a while. A lot of people seem to think the dog gimmick ran out of steam, but aside from some horrendously edited fast-moving action bits, I thought they did just enough with the character and the filmmaking for it not to get old for me, seeing as I only got bored for every other reason I've mentioned thus far. I think the ending is suitably ambiguous, miserable, and creepy, and I'm excited to see what Leonberg is capable of doing, perhaps with a script not written by him. Sorry, Chief.
Nicholas, I am serious!
Okay. Can I at least take a shower and do some things before you ruin my day?
Honestly, I may have been a bit harsh on Zootopia too. Maybe I went into the cinema with the wrong cynical mindset, but I wasn't a huge fan if I'm honest. I thought overall it was decent. I like Judy and Nick's relationship. I like how visually creative it is. The animation and voice acting are both pretty much flawless, and the character designs are brilliant. The story's cute, I suppose. I found Nibbles to be kind of annoying, and while I appreciate the film incorporating a twist villain in Poor But Linksley, I didn't think he was a great or particularly original character. But the whole scene where Judy and Gary the Snake almost fucking die was a nice switch up from the usual falling action in kids' animated films. I couldn't tell you, but I didn't really connect with the film or its sense of humour for some reason. The only exceptions are the partner intervention scene and some of the sarcastic wit that comes from Nick, who is such a great character, mainly thanks to Bateman's sly, dry voice acting. I do want to give it another chance someday because out of all the films aimed at kids on this list so far, this is easily the only one I would feel genuinely comfortable showing my kids. I think it has just enough imagination, harmless but still intense and fun stuff going on, that a kid could take a lot away from it. I forgot most of it as soon as I left the theatre, but the odd scene sticks out on my head even as I write this, so it'll get a rewatch from me as soon as I find the time.
Spoon, please!
If you're a fan of the Final Destination franchise, you may be delighted to know that the monkey is basically the same thing with equal measures of gore, stupidity, inconsistencies, and occasional over-the-top comedy. Only this film cranks it up to 11. Similar to Final Destination 3, ironically enough, this is a really well-made, beautiful-looking, for the most part, film that exists to churn out some fun deaths. But while that film dabbles in the realms of philosophy and lore surrounding the concept of death itself, the monkey takes a refreshingly simple approach, being more akin to a Saw movie with how much gore and blood it at times comically puts on display. While I genuinely loved a lot of this movie, the biggest problem is, like the worst entries in the Final Destination series, the film suffers from bad dialogue, mediocre characters with underdeveloped or just plain dumb relationships, and tonal inconsistencies that make me really unsure of what's supposed to be funny or not. Some of the dialogue is so weird that it feels like it takes place in a strange pocket universe where everyone talks in satirically straightforward fashion. At times it feels like a live-action episode of Itchy and Scratchy with how over-the-top and bizarre the deaths are, which leads to another issue I have: the inconsistency of how Symbol Monkey kills. While some deaths, such as the pawn shop owner and the real estate agent Barbara, are Rube Goldberg-style chain reactions that result in grisly deaths, the monkey can apparently also cause aneurysms and snakes to appear out of nowhere, so the rules of how it does what it does are flawed from the get-go. I kind of like how the monkey could be seen as a fucked up parental figure to Hal, especially seeing as it kills his twin brother Billy, who really is an evil little shit full of so much bitter resentment. I give props to both Christian Convery and Theo James for playing their characters so believably that I didn't even realise the brothers were played by the same actor until researching the film afterwards. Stephen King himself described it as batshit insane, and it is batshit insane. The film is fucking weird and incredibly entertaining as a result, even if it would benefit from a better script and some performances that definitely needed better direction. I don't really understand how Hal, who is such a traumatised recluse that he only sees his son once a year, actually managed to get laid and have a kid to create this convenient conflict to begin with. I'm just gonna say it, all you have to do is not twist the fucking key. The monkey can't reach behind itself. You don't need to bury it in a box or some shit, but leave it locked in the basement behind some books or something and never twist the key. It really is that fucking simple. Based on what I know about the short story, the film mildly improves what is already a pretty ridiculous and weirdly written tale, something Stephen King is infamous for at this point. So I guess Perkins did everything he thought he could with the concept, but it could have been better. Still love it though, and I wouldn't mind watching it again for some of the laughs and gore.
Yeah, I did learn Yacha,
Okay, big Predator fan here, and I fucking loved this movie. Don't get me wrong, it's still a flawed, generic, very predictable story that only very occasionally offers some clever moments in the script that is otherwise full of idiotic moments. The twist of the filmmaking being that the beloved Yautja species is at the centre of it instead of a generic human action hero. I like its themes and the continued use of environment, only this time the Yautja itself is prey to the hostile environment and creatures it has thrown itself into. Determined to prove itself as the apex predator, but through personal growth and forming bonds with other creatures unlike itself, it forms its own unorthodox clan. That's all cute and really silly, but the film makes it work surprisingly well. I really did not like the annoying little dibby alien thing, and I saw the twist that it was related to the giant alien thing coming from a mile away. But the way it incorporates itself into the story and progresses Dak as a character was strangely cathartic. I like Dak in his relationship with Thea, who is your typical android discovering her humanity. At the same time, her former bitch friend Tessa is rebooted and chooses to continue serving the asshole corporation that created them. It's a fun dynamic and gives Elle Fanning a chance to play two different characters while, looking fucking identical. The way Dak uses his newfound knowledge of the environment to rescue his new friend and bring down the humans utilising it is clever, until you remember that it took them something like 3 days to get to their destination because of distance alone, but it seemingly takes him no longer than a day to gather his environmental weapons and return to the humans' base. Sure, why not? I do love the design of the planets in this movie, even if the colour palette is a little muted. The action and editing range from really bad to decent, resulting in a slightly jarring visual experience, especially in sequences meant to be exciting and violent. Again, this is another PG-13 movie that should have been more intense to add consequence to what's going on. In terms of characters, I'm glad the film isn't bloated so it can actually focus on its own story. It's predictable, schlocky, big screen nonsense that everyone should enjoy for what it is. I certainly love it, with only a small degree of shame.
It's honestly kind of surreal to even talk about.
Chris Stuckman is part of a unique little group of YouTube film reviewers who helped spark my passion for the medium. The other four are I Hate Everything, Ralph the Movie Maker, Your Movie Sucks, and Elvis the Alien. Though Chris is unique in being the first of the five to branch out and make a feature-length film. If we're putting Shelby Oaks in the mostly cursed category of YouTuber movies such as the Fred Trilogy and Airplane Mode, then I'd say it's easily one of the best, although it doesn't hold a candle to the Raka Raka Twins' movies Talk to Me and Bring Her Back. Similar to The Monkey, the film is visually striking, with every shot carrying deep layers of purpose and style that undeniably show that Stuckman has always had a keen eye for how a film should look. He creates a visually frightening experience that blends the archaic, the modern, the creepy, and the dark in an exceptional way. I really like the overly long opening sequence that utilises the found footage and mockumentary genres. It caught me off guard and got me hooked. Curious to know where the film was going after that strange bloke showed up and shot himself right in front of Mia. Sometimes the overall presentation falls a little flat, and odd editing choices make many scenes feel a little off. But it doesn't disappoint to a grueling degree. The jump scares were alright and didn't irritate me as much as they do in other horror movies. It is basically a generic cliché horror film told with visual flair, but it does just enough right to creep away from the territory of average, forgettable garbage. I thought the acting, particularly from Camille Sullivan, was fucking fantastic, save for one scene that felt really amateur, and that was supposed to be a serious argument scene between a husband and his depressed, obsessive wife, which caused the scene to stand out like a sore thumb on a fingerless hand. I thought it was a shame that Keith David wasn't in the film very much. While full of stupid moments, the story takes its familiar premise to heights that are original enough to create a strong narrative, exploring the cult and sexually depraved kidnapping aspects of horror that work well when done right. I don't think the ending where Sarah falls out of a window after trying to kill her devil child before being ripped apart by demon dogs was supposed to be funny, but it did make me laugh, and the sudden cut to black was pretty jarring. I will admit that parts of the film did succeed in scaring me, but, and feel free to call me a deranged psychotic asshole, I would have preferred it if it had gone down the route of Sarah actually killing her baby. You can have an even darker, more miserable ending where she's institutionalized, and it's implied that Mia is the next victim of this demon cult impregnation stuff. I don't know, maybe I'm just being too morbid. It's still a decent movie, and I recommend checking it out to support more talented YouTubers like Stuckman and the Raka Raka Twins as they branch out into filmmaking. I have almost nothing to say about Fantastic Four First Steps. While I enjoyed many aspects of the movie, it is, at its core, what it is. Another Marvel movie trying something unique while ending up much the same as we've seen before. It's well known at this point that it went through multiple edits to make it shorter and more commercial, which ironically hampers it because you can feel every cutscene that would have added more to flesh out the plot. It's a sign that Disney is still afraid to take risks and make a movie that might be more interesting for its target audience. Aspects of the story and characters feel underdeveloped, and people who worked on the film and saw the pre-release cuts have said that the removed scenes would have added a bit more depth. It's a shame more than anything because I kind of like these characters, and the chemistry between the cast members is pretty on point, even if one of them is a giant CGI rock man, because they're all talented people who interacted on set and worked on developing their characters' relationships independent of what the final cut demanded. That's good filmmaking. The issue is so bad at one point, however, that the movie forgets the Silver Surfer exists, and she conveniently doesn't appear for ages until she's required to make a heroic sacrifice to save Johnny Storm, despite the movie previously taking time to develop her backstory and character. Speaking of which, Galactus is such a bland and totally not intimidating villain that it actually pisses me off, giving me unpleasant flashbacks to Steppenwolf from DC's Justice League. Ugh, at least he looks cool. The things this film does right, it does very well. The visual effects are flawless, the music is great but not particularly memorable in my opinion. It's funny, the characters are decent, the story on the whole is cute, and it's definitely better than the 20th Century Fox duology and that horrendous 2015 reboot. But I still won't be watching it again anytime soon. Also, I appreciate the reminder that we're getting another spectacle featuring Victor Doom that'll cash in on our fond memories of the characters and actors from the past. Thanks, movie.
You love the sham wow, and I know you love ham. We combined them both, and we got ham wow.
Hamnet isn't quite the manipulative fanfic garbage some claim it is, or the high art masterpiece that others have hyped it up to be. It's just a pretty good, well acted, visually pleasant period piece with a thin narrative that hits all the basic elements of tragedy you'd expect from a historical family drama about a famous figure. I will say, Jessie Buckley is easily one of my favourite actresses, and she can do absolutely no wrong, according to me, and that holds for her performance in this movie. Shout out to Jacoby Dupe for not being awful, as most kid actors are. I'd actually say he was pretty great, especially standing next to the other two girls that, to be fair, didn't have as much to do in the movie as he did. Agnes is easily the standout character, romanticised as a forest-dwelling witch who believes in natural remedies and spirituality, in contrast to her straightforward, work-focused husband who works in the arts. Very Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind of You movie. It has a few clever moments that tackle the idea of an afterlife and spirits existing within the universe in a way that felt sincere and, dare I say, subtle at times. For whatever reason, I didn't emotionally attach to any of the characters, so I didn't cry or anything. I don't really have much else to say. It's just a very solid film that does its job. I've been doing this thing where I listen to an album or compilation album every other day for the next year to expand my music taste beyond Oasis, the Stone Roses, and a few singles and album tracks by various bands here and there. And I would say that this film probably helped encourage that decision. I wasn't really familiar with Springsteen or his music before watching this, but it was refreshing to watch an admittedly crowd-pleasing, simple music biography that wasn't boring or awful, and at the very least gives me a portrayal of a person who isn't a complete asshole and actually behaves like a real human with relatable emotional struggles in his family and social life, as well as the prospect of a career that can be both exciting but also terrifying for somebody who lives for what they do. Apparently Springsteen, in addition to being a very dedicated and talented musician, is also an avid film lover, and watching films was essential to the lyrics of the songs on the album Born in the USA, which I find really interesting. Watching the whole music making process from the character's perspective was also very cool for me, and felt like the film was actually trying to be a bit of an educational piece. The film hits the typical beats you'd expect. It follows a particular pattern relating to parents, girlfriends, and dedication to one's craft that you come to expect from an experience like this. Still, it does it in a way that doesn't feel manipulative or annoying. It is still too long and formulaic for my complete enjoyment, but the acting is great and the story is neat enough to make me curious about the guy's music, so I'm grateful I watched it for those reasons alone. Everybody knows the story of Frankenstein, so there's really no point diving into it too deeply. A scientist wants to prove he's God, so he creates a living humanoid thing from body parts and lightning, allowing the writer to explore complex themes of life, love, death, and science. Need I say more? Everyone seems to have a lot of love for this adaptation of Shelley's 1818 gothic horror classic, whereas I thought it was just fine. I love Del Toro and the imagination he brings to his projects. You can't argue with me when I say that this guy was clearly born to be a creative force of power in the entertainment industry, regardless of what you think of him or his movies. In his own words, he has written over 40 screenplays in his time, but only 13 have been produced as of writing and recording this. You can't deny that he's a natural storyteller who has earned his place as a modern pop culture figure and auteur. Frankenstein is full of plenty of imagination, some enjoyable practical effects and makeup, a lovely gothic aesthetic, and plenty of fun scenes and quirky characters that are charming in their own ways. But it's brought down by its over-reliance on CGI, conveniences and generic story beats that make the script seem weak at points, straight-up irritating cinematography, and a bizarre action angle with the frozen ship that unironically made it feel like a Marvel movie at points. I found Oscar Isaac and the characterization of Victor Frankenstein to be beyond irritating in this movie, which I would attribute to his being miscast rather than to his being a bad actor. Jacob Elordi and Mia Goth steal the spotlight with the best performances in the whole movie. I enjoyed the creature's journey overall, and it was refreshing to have a Frankenstein movie where the female lead actually has an engaging personality and a strong presence as a character, rather than simply being a foil for Victor and the creature to argue over before she's unceremoniously killed. Her death actually had a significant impact on the film, it felt like. I'm not a massive fan of the structure of this movie, and as I mentioned before, the script is full of things that cause characters to act in a way that's nothing short of obnoxious at points, often throwing logic out the window for the sake of unnatural drama. It still has all the poignant themes and interesting concepts that inherently come with adapting the story, but fuck me, this film was hyped up a little too much in my opinion. I think I'm giving it more credit simply because I love this style of filmmaking, and I derive a lot of pleasure from it when general audiences actually say, yes, we want more unique experiences like this one. That does bring a smile to my face. I just hope whatever Del Toro comes out with next is a little more consistent in quality with his earlier work. Conceptually, this film is brilliant, creating a fun twist on the concept of the afterlife by essentially turning it into a business-focused hotel train station where the train you decide to go on takes you to a place you're never allowed to leave again. That creates great opportunities for fun set pieces, creative ways to show the character's journey, and unique environments where the characters can interact and the filmmakers can present visually interesting elements. Eternity does a pretty decent job at this, although I will say the script isn't perfect. As much as I love Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller and Callum Turner in this movie, as well as all the other actors who do great jobs, I found it a bit difficult to relate to the characters. Some jokes were funny, but others just weren't or were annoying. There are a lot of cliche and cheesy moments you'd expect from a movie like this. I wish we got a bit more of the pre-death older versions of the characters, but the film felt a little impatient to get to the core of the story. The middle section runs a bit too long. The rules of this universe don't entirely make a whole lot of sense, but I think the film expects you not to notice because it takes place in a weird, slightly surreal afterlife, even though it's a pretty grounded story and cast of characters that clearly want to be taken seriously. Don't mix my words. I like the idea of wanting a love that may be more ideal in your fantasies than it is in real life, especially if it's with someone you were unwillingly separated from. But this is a woman who has spent actual decades with a loving husband that she enjoys the imperfections of. She's had quite a huge family. The way they set it up in the beginning is really on the nose as well, with someone literally stating within earshot of Larry that Luke might have been a better father and grandfather. Like, fuck you, asshole. I don't really like Luke at first, to be fair, but he did grow on me as the film went on, and he is just a nice guy who's a bit up himself, as is Larry. Joan is likeable enough, but as I said, I find it a bit weird that she'd actually be convinced she still loves Luke after such a long time and considering she barely knew him. I imagine there would be a desire and curiosity, but I still find it odd. I guess that's just the kind of person she is, but no judgments from me. We all have our vices. The film is cute and meaningful overall, and while I find the story a little silly, it still has nice themes and a good moral at the end about learning to live with the flaws of someone you love. Yada yada yada, it's still a good movie at the end of the day, and I recommend checking it out if you feel like it's something you'd enjoy.
I love limes. I love them. They're great. I love them so much, and I like to present them like this in my house.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this film is perfect, and I'm willing to admit that as much as I still loved it, I definitely overhyped it in my mind a little bit after I first saw it. There are some odd music choices, scenes drag on a tiny bit too long, the pacing is off, the structure is all over the place at points, it can't really decide if it wants to be more light-hearted and comedic or not, and it has a lot of shot-reverse, shot-heavy scenes, but for some reason I was a touch captivated by it. The cinematography, while far from exciting, is still blocked and framed very well throughout the film, and while the different plots can feel underdeveloped and rushed, what makes it work is that while these are one-dimensional people that could be seen as shallow and materialistic, that is the point of the film at the end of the day. Lucy doesn't know what the fuck she wants, and similar to her, Henry is so insistent on perfection and matchmaking with the ideal person that he will literally break and reorganize his own bones, something cleverly set up earlier in the film, so that he can be tall enough to fit some societal quota. It's obvious, yes, but it's still an interesting take on an age-old stereotype about specific dating requirements. Dakota Johnson is, well, she's always been a touch hit or miss as an actress, as has Pedro Pascal, but their awkward performances weirdly complement their characters' personalities, given the kind of people that they are. Some have said Evans struggles to play a struggling broke actor believably, but I disagree. The guy has talent and there are plenty of enjoyable scenes with him. More often than not, I found the dead air and awkward moments in the overly long scenes to be quite naturalistic, given I've spent a fair few conversations awkwardly waiting for dead air to pass by. It is fucking painful, believe me. Maybe people who talk too much and have endless things to say because they can't shut up won't get it, but I've been there, believe me. I understand the tonal shift in the B-plot regarding sexual assault in the matchmaking world is jarring and grounded in potential illogical fallacies, but I find it strangely believable within this film's universe that Lucy would be so ignorant and perfectionist about her job. This would be the first time she slips up and throws her undesirable client, Sophie, off to some Randy who ends up being a violent pervert. She's a woman who, despite being full of herself and a little too particular for her own good, doesn't know what the fuck she's doing or what she wants. Which is very relatable, especially for a tosser such as myself. The Housemaid is admittedly dumb, retarded fun, and I love it for its pure insanity that alludes to its supposedly mentally unwell antagonist turned protagonist alone. It's chock full of stupid shit, an over-the-top story, very blatant satire, and sexually explicit nonsense, taking on the form of a full-on female revenge film in a twist that genuinely caught me off guard. I hate to admit it, but like Millie, I was seduced by Andrew. I was fully convinced by the Oscar-worthy, relentless, brilliant acting of Amanda Seyfried that she was indeed a mentally deranged psychopath out to annihilate a down-on-her-luck young woman, no matter what, just because she could. Little did I know, as revealed in Nina's Vertigo-style letter, that Andrew was a psychotic, overbearing, controlling, downright evil cockmuncher who basically falsely imprisoned the woman and her child, carefully deceiving and manipulating everyone around them to ensure that he remained the master. Effectively, there's something strangely cathartic about watching the two former rivals come together and brutalise their charming abuser, smashing the china he so childishly cares too much about, and forcing him to remove his perfect teeth, his most captivating feature that gets all the girls blushing, including his hideous mother, Evelyn. One thing I noticed about the movie is that most of it is shot in a pretty flat, almost dirty way, especially during the sex scenes, making me feel quite uncomfortable a lot of the runtime, before it switches to a more well-framed, stylized cinematography after the true terror begins. I do find Nina's cold, determined way of getting out of that house with her daughter, while leaving some other potentially dangerous woman behind to be Andrew's new plaything and potential murderer, cruel but understandable given what she went through. All of her motivation ultimately revolving around the love for her daughter. However, the fact that she just turns around to help Millie, a convicted murderer that Nina believed could protect herself, is ridiculous, especially seeing that she claims she did it at her daughter Cece's insistence, even though Cece is a little bitch, for valid reasons, who showed nothing but contempt for Millie. Cece also has barely any presence in the film, with most of her importance being implied and pushed onto the audience, but it just about works. Gotta love that ending where it's implied that Millie will basically continue going from house to house murdering domestic abusers, which isn't such a bad thing at the end of the day. I mentioned Seyfried's acting earlier, and that's because she really is immaculate in this role from start to finish. Hearing her refer to rich housewives as cunts was terrific, even with the doozy of a twist at the end. I don't think Sweeney is a particularly great actress, but she's good at what she does. Brandon Sklenar is well cast in his role as well, something I think he deserves more credit for, given how seamlessly he switches from charismatic and overly friendly to dangerously controlling and abusive. It was also refreshing to see a reasonably talented Michele Moroni in a role that isn't him degrading himself in a different but significantly awful erotic thriller, where he plays a kidnapping mobster. I'm of course referring to the 365 Days trilogy. Part of me would have preferred a more grounded, batshit insane thriller where a mentally ill woman just goes full rage mode and murders her housemaid for having an affair with her husband. But I'm more than happy to have a wonderfully entertaining, ridiculously bamboozling erotic thriller that capitalizes on its silliness.
You know I bring drama, excitement, you know me, Larry. From a wicked entrance, from a flip over the rope, to a knock out now.
I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about Prince Naz until I heard about this movie. At first, I thought it was fictional because of its comparisons to the Rocky series, but after watching the film and reading a bit about him and his career, I've come to appreciate the guy's status as one of the best boxers of his generation. People either loved or detested this man for his bizarre, dance-oriented and dodge-heavy fighting style, cocky attitude, arrogance in the ring, and the fact that he came out of practically nowhere and made some of the most revered fighters look like amateurs, all because he could. This biography would probably be on about the same level as Springsteen, simply because it's full of some of the same cheesy, typical of the genre story beats. But there's a captivating, lovable energy surrounding this movie, much like the man himself, never being boring and remaining consistently funny and entertaining throughout the whole experience. Some of my bigger, more difficult to ignore issues stem from the at times awful sound mixing, irritating music choices, and dialogue so on the nose and expositionary that it makes Materialists sound like Tarantino. Still, again, that energy keeps flowing like one of Naz's dance moves, and it is an interesting story full of very interesting characters, supported by some fantastic actors, most of whom aren't even known names aside from Pierce Brosnan and Amir El Masri. Even the kids were pretty good. As with all biographies, the story is said to be heavily exaggerated and fabricated, with Naz himself claiming that he basically had zero input and it was all told from the perspective of his beloved coach Ingle. But he did claim he was pleased with the result, and went as far to say that the scene where Naz and Ingle imagine that they're making up while looking at one another through a boxing ring at a show was something that touched him emotionally because it was the conversation he always wanted to have with Ingle. But their issues remained unresolved at the time of Ingle's death in 2017. And it is probably the best scene in the movie, completely subverting a fool like me who had no idea what the conclusion to their arc was. And the answer was that there was no real conclusion, which is how life goes sometimes. We always wish we said the right thing at the right time, but we don't always pick up the phone or get an answer when we try to call. It's tragic, but the film's exciting, high-energy nature had me hooked. Despite its flaws, Giant is a pleasant experience I recommend to boxing fans and general audiences who would love this kind of film. The Conjuring series is one of those more controversial but hugely popular movie franchises that range from loved to absolutely hated. From absolute fucking garbage like Annabelle, to the surprisingly decent and occasionally pretty scary films like The Conjuring 2. It does suffer from modern horror tropes that irritate me, namely jump scares and boring scenes of so-called character development that don't work. But I would easily call Last Rites one of the better entries, if not the best in the series, tied with the second film, which I love for being quintessentially British more than anything. What I like about Last Rites is that it feels like they actually care about giving these characters a proper send-off, full of scenes where they're likeable, human, and just pleasant to watch on screen. Even giving Ed a heart condition B-plot where he knows this will be his last and potentially most intense battle with a supernatural entity yet. Ed and Lorraine's family drama with Mia, which is caused by their hiding the truth behind the reason she survived her potentially fatal birth, is fun to watch as well, especially with how it relates to the creepy mirror that's now got the Smell family under its spell. Yes, the Smell family. Fucking weird name. While the film has some creepy moments, I wouldn't ever call it scary simply because it isn't. It struggles to balance its two plots satisfyingly, to the point that it feels like it completely forgets about the Smell family at one point, but the characters are understandable and well acted enough that it doesn't completely ruin the experience. I'm absolutely convinced that none of these supposedly true events happen the way they're said to have occurred, especially since the real Ed allegedly had a sexual relationship with a family friend's 15-year-old daughter. The real couple managed to lie about many details before being exposed. Still, since this is presented as a horror movie with a semi-neutral stance on the history behind the case, I can accept these films as stories and nothing more, kind of like Harry Potter or the Bible. I kind of love this movie, even with its stupid shit and lack of genuine horror, and since I've never seen The Devil Made Me Do It and already know it's shit without needing to watch it, check this one out and the first two. Having seen Longlegs and The Monkey, both films I enjoyed to an extent, I couldn't help but wonder what an Oz Perkins film would look like if it were made using a script that he wasn't responsible for writing. I haven't seen Gretel and Hansel in a long time, so I couldn't really remember. I recall it being a passable film, as with Longlegs, so I'd be going into it having the experience basically fresh. As much as this film flew under the radar, despite the surprise success that Longlegs and the Monkey generated, and seems to have been disliked by audiences, it wound up being my favourite of all the films he's directed that I've seen. While I'd sooner watch The Monkey again because it's just so ridiculous and entertaining, Keeper is arguably the best film he's directed. It's cryptic, bizarre, occasionally unsettling, and really weird from start to finish. Chock full of beautiful cinematography and location work that makes for a visual treat, especially scenes that rely on horror and tension. He's certainly good at making very polished films that use their low budgets very effectively. The story of this film, while shrouded in at times needless ambiguity, is an interesting folk tale where our male lead and his obnoxious brother Darren are revealed to have non-fatally shot a woman who subsequently gave birth to these hideous demonic creatures, feeding them with women they date in exchange for longer lifespans. 200 years later, Malcolm and Darren are still growing strong, although the rules of this ritual are a bit jumbled just for the sake of having some half-decent scares and genuinely great creature effects. For whatever reason, the creatures just decide that they like Liz, despite having spent most of the film terrorizing her, and even decide they've had enough of Darren and decide to butcher him off-screen, even though by that point he'd already sacrificed his victim, Minka, in exchange for more extended life. I do like the idea of Liz overcoming the sacrifice and joining forces and becoming one of the creatures to enact revenge on Malcolm, causing him to age rapidly, spending his minimal remaining time on Earth hanging upside down in the middle of the forest as Liz feeds him the same cake he tried to knock her out with earlier in the film. Nick Leppard must have difficulty crafting a more interesting narrative, which is occasionally elevated by clever foreshadowing and creepy concepts, leaving the film feeling more like a string of faintly psychedelic nightmares that prompt Liz and the audience to question what is even real. The dynamic between her and Malcolm is executed fairly well, especially as Liz's trust in Malcolm breaks down. But the biggest issue with this film is that Rossif Sutherland, for whatever reason, isn't very good. In his defense, the character isn't necessarily a groundbreaking villain, but his performance is flat and restrained throughout the whole thing, making him stand out like a wart on a shaved ball bag. I know I'm sounding pretty negative, but I do love this movie because of how strange it is, living in its own little bubble of darkness, despair, and creepiness. I think the rushed feel of Perkins' work methods is evident in this film, as he seems to churn them out at a pretty fast pace. If he just took a bit more time between projects and released fewer so quickly, we'd probably get a pretty fantastic movie. So I am encouraging him to continue working. This film is basically a B-grade Eternal Sunshine with characters who are remarkably similar at a base level, but in execution are nowhere near as interesting. When not comparing the films in my head though, the two lead characters in this film are actually pretty good for what they are, and Robbie and Farrell definitely help bring a lot of colour to the characters. I hate to keep making the comparison because it is probably my favourite film ever made, and I sound pretentious the more I bring it up. But the surreal story of this film is essentially if the dream machine sequences in Eternal Sunshine were just a normal thing in this film's universe. The characters never really react in a way that suggests the bizarre things and people they encounter are shocking, as if they were expecting something like this to happen at some point, which makes what is mostly a fantasy film feel a bit less believable. It makes up for this with some emotionally successful scenes and relatable incidents that the characters go through, building on their growing, complex, emotionally intense relationship despite the short amount of time they've known each other. Clearly a metaphor for two people who might fall in love and share very personal details a little too quickly. I don't want to get too into why I actually have a lot of love for this film, but I found some of the character flaws and themes to be frustratingly relatable, to the point that I struggled to look at myself in the mirror when I went to take a piss after it ended. I will say I love the whimsical nature of everything, the practical set design, and the way the music and artistic expression are incorporated into the story. It ends predictably, but it feels like an open ending genuinely earned, leaving the viewer to decide whether it's a truly happy ending or not. I couldn't pick which one of the two main characters I prefer because I find them understandable and likable for different reasons. It's a valid argument that the Burger King product placement is #cringe, but I get the point you could argue it's trying to make. Human beings love stuffing their faces with junk, especially during times of emotional intensity, and we all enjoy doing it with things we're not necessarily proud of, like Burger King. I'm a bit disappointed this was as disregarded as it was, because it's a film with great potential, even if the execution isn't flawless. so I'd push you to go check it out and make up your own mind. Bloodlines was the one that got me hooked on the Final Destination films. Considering its strong cult following, I'm surprised I never really watched or got into those films before. I guess it's because I was more of a Saw kind of guy when it came to gory torture movies. Having since developed an unhealthy obsession and fascination with these movies, mainly because they're so conceptually interesting, I'm surprised they're not at least a little bit better than they are. But at the end of the day, they're dumb fun with an odd level of self-awareness despite how seriously they take themselves, and this holds for Bloodlines. It does result in a tonally inconsistent mess, but a really entertaining one, with loads of fun moments, especially in the deaths and some of the characters, which is all you're really after in a film like this. Bloodlines is my second favourite in the series, mainly, again, because it was the one that got me hooked, and the first one I sat all the way through without falling asleep or turning it off when I was around 9 years old. While there is absolutely nothing special about the relatively competent filmmaking, and I can tell you this is a film everybody involved had fun making, it does offer something in the way of interesting but hugely inconsistent and entertainingly illogical lore that was new to a viewer like me, and its small ensemble of characters were fun to watch, the obvious standout to this point being Eric, played by Richard Hammond, who was easily a franchise standout because of his entertaining personality, Hammond's dedicated performance, and a lot of the humour and viewer relatability falling on his shoulders. It also helps that he has what is easily one of the best deaths in the entire franchise, being crushed in an MRI machine like a doll being snapped in half by an angry toddler. Apparently Eric was so popular amongst the crew that they considered keeping him alive for a future film, but Hammond refused because he believed that if you're in Final Destination, you have to die. Take notes, Kimberly Corman! The film does get worse after Eric dies, mainly because he's the best thing about the whole movie, and it clearly doesn't know how to end after he leaves. The film is completely illogical and rife with plot holes, mainly stemming from its never-ending contradictions about the laws of death in its universe, the utterly ridiculous nature of Iris living in a supposedly fortified cabin where she can supposedly still get diagnosed with and treated for cancer and ward off death for decades, is so silly but so playful. The effects work suffers from an overload of CGI flesh splatters and blood. A lot of the characters explode into CGI goo, but it looks pretty cool in some scenes. And the practical work, as limited as it may be, shines bright like a bloody diamond in the gore bank. I hate the explanation that death goes for Eric because he tried to interfere with Bobby's fate. I think a better explanation using the still dumb skip to the next victim plot by having Eric be destined to die anyway would work better. Because when you think about it, Eric technically still shouldn't exist because his mother, Brenda, never would have had an affair with Jerry Fenbury because her husband, Howard, never would have existed, meaning they never would have had the argument that resulted in Brenda getting pregnant with Eric, so he couldn't exist either. It's lazy, but not to the degree I'd call it insulting. It just adds to the film's plot hole-driven charm. It goes without saying that the world is a slightly more bitter place without Tony Todd, whose limited but memorable screen time as William Bloodworth gave this franchise something special. He was a delightful, powerful presence in any project he contributed to, with that marvellous voice and those distinct facial features. For his firm dedication to his craft, the man deserved an award for just being a star in a sea of dark matter. The fact that he powered through and filmed his bombastic, emotional goodbye as Bloodworth, even though he was dying of stomach cancer at the time, is commendable. I can only hope that death went easy on him when his time came, because if there's one thing about this series that holds true, it's that Todd's spirit will overpower any illogical plot, weak script, or underdeveloped characterization, helping to make these films more entertaining than they have any right being. The main thing I like about Sinners is that it's a genre-defying film, incorporating elements of Southern Gothic, supernatural vampiric horror, westerns, action, period drama, and, ironically enough, musical elements during one of my least favourite parts of the film. Don't mix my words. I thought the technical craft of the scene and the atmosphere were, for the most part, brilliant. I just had some hiccups about the film, chucking in modern elements that don't belong there. I love the cast of characters and all their performances, from hoodoo practicing wives to cynical alcoholic musicians. There's a fine selection of unique personalities to keep the story going at a smooth pace, and it's sprinkled with clever moments and foreshadowing, giving us plenty of meaty backstories for the characters, although some feel more well developed than others. It reminded me a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2. Although it takes place in the 1930s when the legend of the Old West had long since died, it has many Old West themes in line with Red Dead, incorporating a hefty cast of characters, such as blacks, whites, Asians, and mixed-race people, to highlight how ethnically diverse the Old West was despite standing issues of racism, cotton picking, and segregation. The score, use of in-universe old-school acoustic guitar music, focusing mainly on the soulful beauty of blues, and the gun-ho action with blood splattering everywhere. As cool as the Ku Klux Klan death and the vampire slashes can be, the more action-oriented scenes were probably my least favourite parts of the film, teetering on this line of being well shot and exciting, while also being poorly edited and too over the top for me to fully enjoy them, especially when taking into account the genuinely great scenes involving the brothers and their ambitious cousin Sammy, who you understand and find likeable as they prepare for what could be a great or disastrous night. The script, which is suitable for the most part, ventures into dumb horror shit territory as it gets into the bitty gritty, and, as I mentioned, bizarre editing and sometimes odd music choices that took me out of the film at points. Characters make decisions that are dumb only to add to the dread, but you can't help rolling your eyes when someone puts their hand through the door frame almost willing to be grabbed by a vampire who can't come in, or when an angry wife wants to avenge her husband, so she swings the large doors open and allows all the vampires to come in, dooming everybody else in the process. I will say, the motivations of the vampires were actually interesting, seeing as racist KKK members and white-weary black people under the same vampiric curse can come together as one for the sake of creating their own demonic version of blood-sucking equality. I'll admit, I was kind of on their side a little bit. I'd love to fly, play country and blues, live for eternity without aging, kill characters who make dumb decisions, and emotionally reunite with someone decades later who is now physically older than me because I'm immortal, baby. Obviously, themes about racism and religion are gonna reign heavily in a film like this, and the way they are done is with a lot of artistic and storytelling merit. Haley Stanfield was probably the highlight for me, as were Jack O'Connell and Delroy Lindo, but everyone in the movie is great. While not flawless, Sinners is a kick-ass, entertaining affair, but go into it expecting the first half to be better than the second, although it's far from being a train wreck, as the second half isn't without fun and incredible moments. While not as good as its predecessor in my opinion, this film still has its moments. While the story is a little silly, the acting is jumbled between really great and pretty bad, there are your typical dumb horror moments in the script, and some awful dialogue is thrown into the mix. The cold climate isolated setting, akin to The Thing or Ice from the X-Files, allows for a strong dread and genuine chill in the air surrounding this film, and much of the horror is very effective, backed up by genuinely brutal and intense depictions of blood and gore. What helps is that the cinematography, set design, locations, and the decision to incorporate 8mm and 16mm film for the Dreamworld sequences make for genuinely great filmmaking, much more unique and inspired than the previous film. For visuals alone, as well as some clever moments that complement the plot, this is a film worthy of being studied in class for horror fans and aspiring filmmakers. And I don't say that lightly. While it is a film that could be improved, it does just enough right and stands out enough to justify my saying that. The music is also very effective, complementing the tone. I thought the movie's emotional core worked effectively. Some of the characters in this film don't have a lot to do, and aspects of it feel underdeveloped and, as I said before, just plain silly. But that's to be expected from a lot of these more mainstream horror movies that are pumped out every year. Although Black Phone 2 is easily one of the better ones. As much as I love the Grabber as a horror villain icon, the film feels pretty conclusive, to the point I'd actually be disappointed if they tried to continue this particular story. Although I suppose they could do some kind of Jason Lives storyline where a ritualistic worshipper of the Grabber brings him back from the land of the dead, and he becomes some kind of pinhead Cenobite sadistic torturer with supernatural powers like in this film. Wait a minute. Why the fuck am I not writing these movies? As you may know, I have a full written version of this video available on my Substack account as an official list of sorts, but for this segment, I wanted some company. I thought, maybe people will get bored of listening to me, because I even get bored of my own voice sometimes. So, without further ado, this is a special little sequence where me and my good friend Callum discuss weapons together in my messy bedroom. I hope you enjoy. Alright, you ready?
Let's go.
Alright, sweet. Good afternoon, evening, morning or night, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still Doherty, obviously. As I just briefly mentioned, I've got my good friend Callum with me today.
Hello everyone.
We're doing a little spoken mouth word segment for this review. I already wrote a full review for the movie we're currently discussing on this list, but I thought this would be more fun because this was a film that Callum and I saw together in the cinema when it came out. It was one of our excursions, wasn't it?
Divisive, to say the least.
Divisive excursions,
Yeah.
Yes. The movie I'm talking about is Weapons, obviously. We've had some dinner, we've had a drink, so this is going to be a fun discussion, but we remember the movie enough to talk about it confidently.
Yeah, within reason, to be honest. We do. Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I've refreshed my mind about it, so yeah. My opinion at the time is actually kind of different from my opinion now, so... We
can dabble into that.
Of course, yeah.
So, obviously, as long as what I've written corroborates with what I'm saying now, I can call myself a trusted reviewer. If not, I'll call myself a trusted reviewer anyway and ignore those irregularities in the pension fund. So, what did we think of Weapons, directed by Zach Krieger?
Krieger, is it? I've been trying to figure that out.
It's American, so it's one of those funny things.
Well, good question, I suppose. I mean, I think at the time I disliked it a lot more.
You didn't like it at all?
No, I wasn't the biggest fan, to be honest, at the time, especially when I came out. I think when I came out of the cinema at the end of it, I was expecting something totally different than what I actually got.
A bit more like his previous film, Barbarian,
which
we both enjoyed. You told me to watch it because we both knew Weapons was coming out, and you said to me you should watch Barbarian first. Because it's a great movie, and it is a great movie. I love Barbarian. I had my issues with it, but I thought overall it was a really strong horror debut. Because Zach has directed movies before this, but they were mainly comedies with his. Yeah,
they're the only two that I've seen of his, to be honest. I think.
Yeah, it was like he had like a comedy partner who passed away or something, and they made like a movie. In memory of him and such things, I think. I might be misremembering that. And then he decided he was going to get into horror movies, which he did with Weapons. With Barbarian, sorry.
Barbarians, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, we can go into Weapons.
A strong debut.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a strong debut. I think I got... Actually, I wasn't sure what to expect from Barbarians. I mean, I think I was over a friend's house and they put it on.
See, I
didn't know anything about it.
I didn't know the twist or anything, so it caught me off guard. I loved it. We won't say it here for those who haven't seen it because we're talking about Weapons. Excuse the phone. Should have muted that. Do that now. But I would highly recommend it too. It's a great movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, they share a lot of similarities, both films. At least I found. I mean, in Krieger's whatever his name is, his style, they shared a lot of similarities. I mean, at least from the only two films that I've seen of his,
they're really well made.
They both kind of jump between characters a lot. I mean, in both films, you can tell he likes to jump between different characters, give you a bit of backstory on each character, and then bring them all together at the very end.
Which is actually a really great way of telling a story, in my opinion.
Well, it depends on how it's done. We'll get to that.
Well, we've seen it in like Bad Times at the El Royale. We've seen it in numerous other movies that preceded Weapons and Barbarian by decades.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some examples now, but...
To see a modern director do it is quite a fun thing, to show that at least that art of storytelling isn't completely dead.
Of course.
And I think he did that as well as he thought he could in Weapons, in my opinion. The one word you used, ironically enough, after we watched it, was self-indulgent. Do you stand by that?
To a degree, yeah. But to your point about, using that kind of... technique, a storytelling technique, where you look at a lot of different characters, you jump back and forth and you bring them all together.
Kind of like Pulp Fiction.
It has to be exactly right. It has to be done in such a way that the payoff is worthwhile. In Pulp Fiction, the payoff is absolutely worthwhile.
As it is in Barbarian, I think.
Exactly. Barbarian leaves you sat at the end, but it's not spoiling anything, but the credits roll with Barbarian. And I know when I watched a good horror film, or even a good thriller, or a darker movie, when you're sat there in silence and it's actually genuinely hit you, it hits you with an impact. Weapons, for me, didn't have that payoff. It didn't earn...
I do agree with that.
It didn't earn it.
I agree with that. Okay.
Like you say, I mean, obviously, I suppose talking about, going back and forth between characters, I think it didn't earn it. That was one of my main criticisms of the film.
The funny thing I told you after we watched it, and I distinctly remember this, was me saying, I actually thought the film should have been longer. I think it should have taken time to flesh out a lot of aspects of it. I don't know if this was a restriction imposed upon him. I don't think it was, in my opinion. I think the script was definitely written this way because he seems like a filmmaker to me where his voice is loud enough, at least, and popular enough. In fact, I think the story is that Jordan Peele fired one of his executives for not successfully buying the script because he was so angry about not having it.
Right.
It's a script that is definitely what it's supposed to be. So at least from that perspective, I think that's a good thing because filmmakers deserve their own voices.
Of course, yeah.
But I do kind of agree with you in the sense that it didn't feel earned by the end of it because I felt like it was trying to be a bit Pulp Fiction-y, have this non-linear narrative that, in my opinion, I actually think the film would have benefited from a less non-linear narrative. Sorry, I guess we'll get into spoiler talks because we're talking about this movie in particular.
Yeah, but we should have said that at the start. Yeah, but if you haven't seen the movie, then turn this off.
Watch this. What I liked about it was I liked certain characters. So Julia Gardner,
I think so. Yeah,
and Josh Brolin, their characters in particular were fucking amazing, and the performances. All the acting's good. The woman from Uncle Buck, which we watched at your mum's around Christmas.
I didn't know that was her. Was it actually?
That was her. His girlfriend, Shanice.
Oh my god!
She played the old witch lady. Yeah. So your problem was that it was like, I'm speaking for you now, but you didn't like how it just ended up being your typical witch possession story, right?
That was one of my critiques of the film. We can definitely get to that.
And as much as I loved it, I did think it was a bit generic by the books.
Yeah, that's definitely. But yeah, I mean, back to, as you say, talking about the non-linear aspects of the film, right?
I think
another criticism for me.
Do you think it would have been better if it just started straight off the bat saying what this film's going to be, and would have been less disappointing had it not just had that big twist reveal, that kind of generic witch folk horror thing? I think it would.
Pulp Fiction, for example, right? You know, non-linear, but it's increasing gradient throughout the film of tension. You know, the tension is constantly increasing to the point where, you know, for each individual character arc, it never feels like the tension ever kind of goes away or is dissipated at any point.
Whereas with weapons, it kind of does.
Absolutely, that's the problem. You know, it's showing you all these different characters and jumping between them, but at the very moment where it reaches almost a fever pitch of tension, it dissipates because it jumps on the character, and it does that the entire film. If you're going to do that, then you need some massive payoff at the end. But it's just like, for me, it was just a series of disappointments again and again.
With a generic outcome.
Oh, and the ending with the witch is massively generic.
Whereas again, what I think would have made the film stronger and would have benefited it if it was linear instead of non-linear. Sorry. So we already know what's happening from the beginning. Because then we would have been less disappointed by its more typical outcome. And I actually think the story would have been more intriguing because, don't get me wrong, it's completely rational to think that a film is more tense and benefits more from having an ambiguous narrative. But I think some stories benefit from being the exact opposite. And in my opinion, this was one of those stories where if we just knew what was going on, it actually would have made it more tense for an audience in the sense of... you know, we know what's happening and we know what these characters should be scared of, but they don't know, so that makes it a bit more frightening. But at the same time, the film does this thing where it contradicts itself, where it would also be less tense and less compelling if we did know. This might sound weird, but what I'm trying to make out is that this film needed a bit more work done to it, because I feel like either way, the story for what it is in what we have inherently suffers from failing to be satisfying from either angle.
Yes.
I just think aspects of it needed to be a bit different.
Yeah.
I can't really clearly explain it any more than that.
I think a good story knows what it wants to communicate.
Whereas this one felt
Krieger has you get the impression he had a lot of ideas thematically about what he wanted to put across, you know. Whether it's about alcoholism, societal decay, which, you know, you get a lot of that kind of vibe from the film itself.
Dynamics between parents and children.
Exactly, right? You know, family trauma, you know, a family member who's a corrosive element of the family and the wider society around them.
Bleeding in and causing trouble. Yeah. And
you get the impression, Krieger's got a lot of these great ideas, which, you know, in Barbarian, he communicates it a lot better.
Because ironically enough, there's fewer ideas in that movie. Or rather, with Barbarian, it's the same idea, but it's explored from all different angles.
Well, yeah.
Whereas with Weapons, it felt more like various different ideas explored from kind of one more narrow angle.
Yes.
Or I could be wrong.
No, you are right.
It was explored from too many angles.
It's like so many themes that he's trying to compact in. No, that's all right. There's so many themes he's trying to compact in there.
Yeah.
He never finds an efficient way of communicating them, or an effective way of doing so. Like we say with Barbarians, for example. I mean, we can go on to the supernatural element.
I know it sucks comparing these two movies, but we can't help but do it because the same guy made them.
Well, exactly, right? And in many ways, you know, they're very similar.
They are.
in terms of execution, I mean, you got the flashbacks in Barbarian, same way that you do with weapons, right?
And also, they look beautiful. These are very well crafted, polished films.
Visually, yeah. I mean, I can't find fault with like how they're shot. Right? Cinematography is great, but I think it's, as you say, the flaw is when you want to communicate so many things at once that it's like you're trying to be a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none, right? You don't truly hit on any one of them particularly well. I mean, we can get to the ending of the film in a bit, and also the supernatural witch element, which is another personal preference of mine that I don't like. That's why I feel like it was a cop-out. Barbarians was scary to me at points, genuinely scary and unsettling. There wasn't really a moment in Weapons where I felt like that.
There was one moment. It was when she comes out of the house and she's like,
admittedly, actually, sorry, with a knife.
Cuts her hair off.
Now that was actually okay. All credit to Gregor and whoever else was involved in that film, but that scene was actually that had me unsettled. I
didn't find it scary, but I thought it was effective, if that makes sense. So I personally wasn't unsettled by it, but I was watching it thinking, this would unsettle me.
That was probably my favourite scene of the film, I'd say. No, I think that was...
Did you like the... I mean, just kind of getting into the individual storylines, did you like... Because I think one of the highlights of this film, for me, were the drug addict character, and what I did...
The police officer.
And the police officer. And what
puts his hand in his pocket and he brings out the syringe.
Well, what I did appreciate about the non-linear narrative, for as much as I'm riding on it, was I did kind of enjoy how those came together, because the junkie subplot is actually really great in my opinion, and the actor who plays him,
I'm trying to remember now.
Such a convincing homeless guy, like he's just such a weird, dopey, thieving, lying piece of shit. But you kind of feel a bit bad for him because you get the impression this is not like who he wants to be, but it's just what he knows how to be.
Yeah.
And the police officer is kind of just a fucking asshole, but like he doesn't have his life in order. He's trying to get his life in order, but he's constantly drawn back by these temptations to do bad again.
Exactly.
Especially after a negative incident like what happens with the homeless guy and getting his finger syringed.
Yeah. After he asks him.
And what you're saying is like thematically it works really well. But when I think about it in the context of the rest of the movie, I appreciate it a little bit less.
Yeah, the cut there, my camera, I don't know.
You may have noticed a cut there, because my camera,
There you go.
So societal themes.
Cheers. There you go, it happens. What are you going to do?
It is recording. What else did you have to say?
I'm trying to remember where I actually left off, to be honest. I think we were talking about...
the themes that come with stuff like the coffin and the homeless guy.
Yeah, like you're saying about like, the themes that Weapons is trying to put across to people, and it's like, the corruptibility of the individual. Alcoholism as well. I think alcoholism is definitely something that's heavily referenced in the film. I mean, the main teacher, Jennifer... I can't remember her name. Jennifer Garner. Is it Jennifer Garner? I thought she was like... Jennifer Garner's like... She was married to Ben Affleck, wasn't she?
My god!
No, Jennifer Garner's like another actor.
No, it's...
I can't remember her name.
Isn't it Julia something?
I think it's Julia Garner or something.
It's Julia Garner, isn't it?
I can't remember.
I feel like an arsehole because I actually really like
What was the reason that there was the gun on the roof that was...
I don't know. You know what? I'm glad you bring that up because that's something that pissed me off about this movie. I said this at Julia Garner.
That was close.
This is something that pissed me off about the movie when he has the nightmare and there's like the weapons sign, and I thought the twist was going to be, maybe these children have been kidnapped and turned into like mind warped imperialistic soldiers or something. And
that's what I thought it was going to be.
I've looked up and I can't find a real answer. Why the fuck was there an assault rifle? It doesn't make any fucking sense.
There's definitely someone who explained it. I can't remember.
There is, but I don't know. But even if there is an explanation, it pissed me off. Because then, here's what I was picturing in my head. Oh, we're going to call it weapons now. Because there's a gun in it.
It was too literal. I think it was too in your face.
It was so stupid. That was a part of the movie I really didn't like.
It was too in your face.
I don't know if you noticed, but in the theatre I audibly went, oh for fuck's sake. Because I immediately knew that's why the film's called Weapons. I literally said, oh, for fuck's sake. You didn't hear me because I whispered it, because obviously we're in a cinema, respect the audience and whatnot.
Yeah, it just felt too obvious, Yeah.
It's not like Barbarian, where it's called Barbarian for a reason. It refers to the barbaric nature of a certain type of person.
Yeah, but then if you think about it, even the Barbarians, a lot of them...
But it's more subtle.
Who's the guy who was in Dodgeball who's in Barbarians?
Justin Long.
Justin Long. He himself, is as a character, is a barbarian in many ways.
Without spoiling it, he's a barbarian.
Yeah, so
he takes and takes and
it works. And weapons is like, you didn't need to show a literal like AR-15 assault rifle on top of a roof somewhere.
No, it didn't make sense.
Most of the characters in it are weapons, as in they are dangerous when they're corrupted, right?
Yeah, that would have been enough.
Yeah, right. So, and it already did that. And that's, you know,
and
that's a sign of...
We already got that far by the end of the main character segment. We understood.
That's a sign of me of a director who's kind of, what's the word,
forcing his point.
Scrambling to get the point across, you know, without confidently, trusting in what he's actually made, which is another problem. And, you know, another scathing critique of the film is that I think the current state of cinema today is that there's so much shit out there.
Yes.
You know, cinema is absolutely diabolical.
Do you think that's why people love this movie so much?
I think it's why it's overrated, because if you have a film that is just mediocre or just has mediocre writing, it stands above the rest. It stands above the ocean of shit.
Which are usually awful. I mean, I talked about a film called Primate recently, which is fucking terrible.
Never seen it. No.
Don't watch it.
No, I'm not going to. Primate.
There's the monkey movie.
I'm surprised. Yeah. It's called Primate. Fucking hell.
We're going to talk about a blatant title. There you go. But yeah, I get what you mean, because I was expecting this to be like a masterpiece. I really was. And I was disappointed.
That word masterpiece is overused now.
As many times as I tell myself I understand what false marketing is, I still fucking fall for it.
Everyone says everything's a fucking masterpiece now. It's like, oh, it's a masterpiece. It's like you literally watched like 5 films in your entire life. What are you talking about? You watched a fucking Minecraft movie and you're like, that's a masterpiece.
Oh my god, don't.
It's like people out there that are literally like, they'll call anything a masterpiece and they'll put Martin Scorsese's face over the top of it and be like, oh my god, this is amazing.
We're getting to that point where we're making these kind of jokes now.
Well, you know, I mean, come on. I mean, the amount of time I hear people say, this was a masterpiece, it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I agree.
I think they actually, it's controversial, you know, and it's entirely possible it didn't happen. I think someone within the studio that was responsible for releasing Weapons paid off Rotten Tomatoes.
Do you think so?
I think it happens a lot.
That does happen a lot. But
you know, a lot of films now, they actually integrate into the marketing for the film the Rotten Tomatoes score that the film got.
But then I think to myself that individual voices that are cynical like us, like for example, your movie sucks. Like he loved this movie, he gave it like a 7. Like that's like a good score for him. It's like a lot of individual people did love it, but I do understand what you mean in the sense of like it does feel somewhat phoned in.
Yeah, it definitely. It feels overrated. It feels like
people think this is better than Barbarian.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion. Absolutely,
of course, yeah.
You know? And people's opinions are going to differ. You know, but also there's a lot of idiots out there. So you know, what are you going to do?
True.
And
yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a tough one. I think. I was one other point I was missing from the film. Oh yeah, the witch, right?
Well,
so
this leads into what I was about to say about the tonal shift.
Supernatural element.
No, the tonal shift. You complained about this after we watched it. It's how it kind of suddenly becomes more comical and bizarre.
Yeah, comedic.
And this leads into what I said earlier, where I think it would have benefited from a more linear narrative where the tone was more clear from the beginning.
Comedy horror is hard to do, but I think Weapons tries.
I disagree, because there are films like Cemetery Man, which balances.
I haven't seen that.
I've got it on Blu-ray.
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods. Those are films that blend that genre quite seamlessly.
Evil Dead is probably the best.
Evil Dead, exactly. Even Spider-Man, the Spider-Man movies, they're kind of horrors, like the Green Goblin and the Doctor.
Yeah, but if you look at the amount of comedic horror film attempts that there have been, how many of them have been worthwhile compared to those that have not been worthwhile?
It can be done with a bit of effort, is my point. And I feel like Weapons is a film that could have done it very well had it just tried a bit harder, in my opinion. Because I think Barbarian does it pretty well. There are parts of Barbarian where I was laughing quite audibly, and in the next scene I was getting successfully terrified and thinking this works really well.
Kreger definitely does that. I mean, it's Jordan Peele, right? I mean,
well, Kreger was traditionally a comedy guy.
He integrates, Jordan Peele integrates. Is Jordan Peele to Get Out? He integrates a lot of comedy.
He also did Nope. He did Us. Those are seamless horror comedies.
Get Out is best. So I mean,
in my opinion, Nope's better. But Get Out is a great example.
Get Out for me is brilliant. It's a brilliant example of how you do comedic horror, right? It blends both of those perfectly. Weapons was like, there were definitely some funny comedic elements to the film, but I think you're talking about the tonal shift at the end, where spoilers, by the way, where essentially all the kids are awakened from their hypnotism, and they chase this old witch through a house, and then they basically
does a
tear her
great
apart.
job because she's that amazing actress who's in a lot of comedy films.
But then it turns out that it's a dying witch that's harvesting the lifeblood of children. It's
Which was a bit ridiculous, yeah.
I mean, this is why it's like, this is personal preference above all else for me. It's like, for me, I prefer horror that doesn't have supernatural elements to it.
Yeah.
I prefer horror that is purely human, right?
Yeah.
Because I think humans are the most terrifying of all creatures.
They are. That's why American Psycho is one of my favourite horror movies.
Exactly, right. But when you start introducing the supernatural element into it, it goes from it goes into fantasy, but also it's like, explains it away with magic. Oh, it was magic that did all of this. It's like, come on. I mean, we mentioned this a second ago before we actually had this conversation, which is about prisoners, right?
Yeah.
Prisoners...
Completely human.
It's different genre, I suppose. It's a crime thriller, right? It's a thriller drama film. It's not categorised as a horror, but the same kind of themes. Children disappearing, going missing, societal decay, people's capacity for evil.
Is alcoholism touched on in that film?
Does
he drinks a lot?
Well, yeah, that's understandable,
Well, yeah, his daughter went missing.
I think alcoholism is as much of a centrepiece as it is in the themes
society
of weapons
than it is films.
But weapons for me is like, I said this to you earlier, right? Prisoners is what weapons should have been.
Yeah.
Or what it was trying to be in many ways.
A more human character drama.
Exactly, and it would actually point to Prisoners where you actually there were generally scary moments for me, or tense moments.
I thought some of it was fucking terrifying.
The whole cult. Yeah. I mean, I'm spoiling this film for anyone, by the way, as well, but I highly recommend it.
Would you say Grandma did it?
Yeah, it's the same kind of deal, right? Creepy grandma kind of does it all, but she's human. She's very human, but she's.
Do you think Weapons was slightly inspired by Prisoners?
Oh, absolutely, it was inspired by Prisoners.
I agree with that. Thinking about it.
Yeah.
And
it's like a witch, an old woman kidnapping children.
Prisoners is a better movie as well, I think.
Oh, Prisoners is infinitely better than Weapons. Jesus Christ! I mean, it's like it doesn't even fall within the same league as Prisoners.
Yeah.
Prisoners is brilliant.
Do you think the ending of Weapons would have worked better if it had been established earlier on that this is the kind of tone the film's going for? That
it's a witch?
Yeah, like I said, I was less non-linear.
I mean, I was expecting
embraced its comical tone.
It's difficult because you get the impression that Kreger and whoever else was involved in the production, they wrote themselves into a corner when you've got children that are doing Naruto runs through the neighbourhood, right? It's like, how can you explain that away? I mean.
In a way that works.
Okay, it's the military. I mean,
which would have made more sense for the title.
It's a frequency. It's the military have made a mistake, and they're letting off this frequency that makes children do the Naruto run.
It would have complemented the tone more, even though it's a ridiculous explanation.
Yeah, but then I suppose, is it any less ridiculous than, it's a dying witch that's harvesting the lifeblood of children?
Well, I mean, when you think about the MK Ultra project and shit like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how, maybe if you didn't have the children doing the Naruto run and you didn't show the children going missing, the children just went missing,
bit more
like Prisoners, right?
Yeah.
And you leave it up to interpretation, and then you reveal what actually happened. Then you
Callum, everyone has video camera doorbells now. Of course you'd see the kids.
Well, exactly, right. This is another problem, right?
Because you can't just set your movie in the 90s or something.
Well, exactly. Obviously, that's a difficult one. So, I suppose they wrote themselves into a corner where it had to become supernatural because, you've got a bunch of children doing the Naruto run.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, but just a witch who possesses people. It's like, how many times has that been done in horror? Can you not come up with a better idea? But
I somewhat
it felt like a cop out.
I guess my difference is that even though I'm kind of riding on this movie the same as you, I did ultimately find it very entertaining.
Oh, fair enough.
And I respect the film for at least achieving what it was trying to do, and for that reason, I love it. I love the individual voice. I'm not saying I could do any better because I know for a fact I couldn't. Obviously, Craig is a really talented guy, and I'm excited to see where his career goes next.
I can definitely do better. I can definitely could, 100%. Yeah.
We probably could together. I couldn't by myself, but I could do it.
I can do better, 100%.
Yeah?
Without doubt.
Alright. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see his Resident Evil adaptation, though.
Is he actually doing what? I didn't even know this. But
this year.
He's doing the Resident Evil adaptation.
He could potentially make the best video game adaptation since Silent Hill. You never know.
Well,
the original Silent Hill, not the two other ones.
That's brave, because I mean, 9 times,
it's a bold
if not
career
like,
movie, isn't it? Yeah. So, what would we rate this movie out of 10?
Oh, well, at the time when I was in the cinema, it was probably like a 3. But I think I'm gonna upgrade it to probably like a 6. I'd say, being generous. Now, mediocrity. You know, it's like forgettable. In like 10, 20 years, I don't think anyone's going to be talking about this film. You know,
That
which
I
for
can
me is
agree
a good
with.
measure of how impactful work is.
I do think Barbarian will be talked about more, personally.
I think Barbarian is more susceptible to becoming a cult film, you know. I think because it's so messed up, you know, and that's what I love about it, you know. It's like that's what works about it. But weapons are just forgettable, you know. A six. I'll give it a 6. You know.
But you know what? You and I are almost on the same page.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Weapons a 6 as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's a higher 6 than you. I wouldn't give it a 7, but it's a 6, and I love it dearly. On Letterboxd, I give it the little heart. I love this movie. As much as I have my gripes with it,
would be a 7. You know, I can't imagine it being on that level. You know?
Well, I would give Barbarian a 7, for example. This is a 6. So I think for a second film, they can either be better or worse. This one was worse in my opinion, but I still think it's a good movie with a lot of artistic merit. I'm not going to blame people for thinking it's the best movie ever. I'm not going to blame people for giving it a 10. I think it's a really solid
if you give it a
film.
10, there's something seriously wrong with you, genuinely. There is. So, yeah, anyone who does,
His words, not mine, but I do kind of agree with him. Thanks for doing this, man.
No worries, happy to help. Yeah.
Let's go smoke and get drunk.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet, yeah. You may recognise Lynn Ramsey's name as the director behind such films as We Need to Talk About Kevin and You Were Never Really Here. While I haven't seen We Need to Talk About Kevin as of writing this, You Were Never Really Here was a film I have a lot of respect for, as much as I didn't have full-on love for it. And Die My Love was one of those films that barely caught my eye because it had frustratingly poor marketing. It's always refreshing to find and watch a film that's trying something different and actually succeeding. Die My Love isn't perfect. It has some really bizarre music choices and is a bit too abstract for my taste, but I love this movie. You don't have to be a genius to realise the whole thing is a metaphor for postpartum depression following the isolated, sexually frustrated, deadpan Grace, whose perception of reality and paranoia, exacerbated by her psychosis, gradually get worse as the film goes on. While Robert Pattinson, Nick Nolte, and Sissy Spacek are all great in this movie, Jennifer Lawrence steals the show, delivering an electrifying, career-defining performance. I remember reading about the interesting experience she had when filming began, already 4 months pregnant herself, yet feeling surprisingly great because of her hormones, channeling those positive feelings into negative ones and using her knowledge of the book's character to replicate them. It wasn't until after she had her second child that she suffered from postpartum depression herself, creating a strange feeling of having gone through it twice. Grace and Jackson are both easy to understand as characters, making bad decisions that isolate one another without necessarily being bad people, just troubled and unsure of what they're doing with their lives as they crack up and get older. There are affairs, sexual anger, psychotic episodes, crawling through grass while masturbating, public meltdowns, car accidents, awkward scenes, and irritating little dogs that get blasted by shotguns. Yep, it offers a lot of what I like about experimental filmmaking. I gotta say, this movie does a lot right. You can actually thank Martin Scorsese for this film's existence, since he sent the book to Lawrence's production company, Excellent Cadaver, and suggested they make a film with her in the lead role. If you're into bonkers, crazy love stories with a lot of dark humour that's surprisingly effective, I'd say definitely check it out. If you'd like to read the written version of this piece, you can find it on my Substack page. Got some more cool videos coming soon, so I hope you will have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, whatever the time is where you are or at the time of watching this. And I will see you in the next one.